The story begins with a 15-year-old boy named Siroka Mamoru, a first-year student at Imagahara High School. He stands among a group of fellow students, watching an archery club practice session. On the stage, a girl named Yumizuka Iroha, also 15 and a first-year student at the same school, demonstrates her impressive skills with the bow. As he watches, his face lights up with surprise and admiration. He thinks to himself that Yumizuka Iroha is as popular as ever. Meanwhile, she stands confidently, knocking an arrow onto her bow. With intense focus, she draws back and releases the arrow, which speeds through the air and strikes the bullseye. Siroka gets delighted and observes her with a beaming expression, thinking to himself that as expected every movement she makes is flawless. He realizes it's no wonder people say that every step in archery is crucial before releasing the arrow. As he ponders this, a few other students nearby start to react, clearly impressed. They loudly exclaim how amazing, beautiful, and cool Yumizuka is, calling her the bow princess of Amaku. Siroka winces at their outburst and immediately sensing it might cause trouble for her. And just as he feared, Yumizuka's voice suddenly rings out from behind, sharp and angry, calling out to them. She sternly requests that they refrain from talking during the visit and emphasizes that this place is a sacred dojo. The students feel embarrassed, quickly apologize, and agree with her. Observing this, Siroka notes that while she remains as strict as ever, there is clearly more to her than just her stern demeanor. Once the practice session concludes, the students head to their classroom, where the teacher stands at the front and asks them to introduce themselves. Yumizuka stands at her seat with a composed expression and introduces herself. She explains that her family has practiced archery for generations, and she began learning at the age of 4. She casually mentions that she also won the national archery competition in her 3rd year of middle school. With a polite tone, she adds that she sees studying and archery as one and the same, believing that success comes from following proper procedures and practicing consistently. She intends to apply this same mindset to her studies. Concluding her introduction, she warmly says that she is pleased to meet everyone. After hearing her detailed introduction, the other students begin murmuring among themselves. Some remark on her beauty but find her a bit too stubborn, while others say she seems difficult to approach. Meanwhile, the teacher calls on the next student to introduce himself. Siroka, sitting beside her, watches with a look of surprise. Noticing his gaze, she turns to him with a warm smile. She politely says that it seems they are now seat neighbors, and addressing him by name, she adds that she is also pleased to meet him. He is stunned to hear her call him by name, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he realizes she already remembered it. In that moment, he understands that she isn't just strict, she genuinely cares for others. He thinks to himself that she embodies the qualities of an ideal Japanese woman, and it's precisely this aura that made him fall for her. However, he quickly acknowledges the problem that many others seem to feel the same way about her. After school ends, he rushes out, running through the streets with a worried expression. He nervously mutters to himself that he was delayed and that the archery club's practice might already be over. When he finally reaches the spot, he finds Yumizuka still on the stage, practicing alone. Watching her in secret, he can't help but smile and thinks how dedicated she must be to keep practicing long after everyone else has gone home. He knows the visiting hours are over, but he can't help sneaking a quick peek. Meanwhile, Yumizuka remains focused, holding her bow with ease. As he watches, he recalls that in archery, every shot involves a sequence known as the 8 stages of archery. Only by mastering these 8 movements can one consistently hit the target. Just as he's lost in his thoughts, a song suddenly drifts through the air, catching his attention. As he glances at her bag, he realizes the music is coming from it. He wonders if it's her phone ringing. Despite the interruption, Yumizuka's focus remains unwavering. He is impressed by her level of concentration. The phone rings again, this time with a song called Yuri Pure. Hearing the tune, Siroka, caught off guard, forgets he's trying to stay unnoticed and loudly exclaims that it's a song from an anime for little girls. Realizing he spoke too loudly, he quickly covers his mouth, nervously wondering if she heard him. Suddenly, she turns around, glaring at him with an angry expression. He is taken aback and mutters that she must have heard him. Despite his intrusion, she calmly returns to her practice. He is even more astonished by her composed demeanor and thinks that she moves with almost robotic precision. As she aims her bow at the target, her foot slips, causing her to fall to the ground. Her arrow, released by the sudden motion, flies off and strikes the wall near Siroka. He is shocked to see the arrow so close to him and exclaims that it nearly hit him. Yumizuka, visibly distressed, immediately drops to her knees and begins apologizing through her tears. He is taken aback by her sudden shift from standing to kneeling. With tears in her eyes and a trembling voice, she explains that as the daughter of the head of the Yumizuka clan, such a mistake is unacceptable. She adds that the only way to atone for her mistake is to commit seppuku. She sits on the floor and asks him to wait a moment. Pulling down the upper part of her clothing, she places the bow in her lap. Both of them then settle comfortably on the stairs. Siroka, still confused, asks her if she believes she will crumble if she doesn't follow the proper step-by-step procedure. She politely agrees and explains that she was raised with complete devotion to archery. She has practiced the procedure for archery hundreds of thousands of times. Looking saddened, she adds that this intense focus is why she feels worthless if she deviates from the established method. If her procedure is disrupted, it drives her to despair and makes her lose control. Hearing this, he calmly apologizes, acknowledging that if he hadn't been peeking from the side, this situation might never have occurred. But Tess sadly reassures him that it's not his fault. She explains that the issue stemmed from her forgetting to turn off her phone, and that using Yuri Pure as her ringtone is completely inappropriate for someone devoted to Budo. She calmly adds that now that he has witnessed this lapse and tainted the Yumizuka name, she can no longer stay here. He is taken aback by her response. She explains that her father is extremely strict, which is why she can no longer stay at this school. Hearing this unusual reason, he is shocked and thinks he definitely doesn't want her to transfer schools because of him. He steps forward and assures her that it's okay. He won't tell anyone about what just happened. He promises to keep her weakness a secret and assures her that she doesn't need to transfer. Still feeling down, she comments that it's her fault he was troubled. He quickly reassures her not to worry about it and explains that as classmates, it's natural to help each other. With a nervous expression, he adds that he genuinely wants to support her. She is surprised and slightly embarrassed, responding that he should follow the proper procedures before making any confessions. He is puzzled, wondering if he's just been rejected. Despite his mixed feelings, he reflects that even though his impression of her has changed, the Yumizuka who struggles without a proper procedure is actually quite endearing. The next day, she is once again at the quiet dojo, practicing her archery. She loads her arrows, takes aim at the target, and fires with precision and determination, all in a quiet and focused manner. He observes her from a short distance. He watches her with a pleased expression, thinking how incredibly cool she looks while practicing archery. He reflects that it's no wonder she's known as the Bao Princess of Amaku. However, he also realizes that even the confidence she would falter if her procedure went off track for even a moment. He considers how, as the daughter of the head of an archery family, it would be problematic if anyone else discovered her weakness. He recalls his promise to keep her secret safe. Later in class, Yumizuka reads an English book with a genuine and focused demeanor. As she reads, the other students watch her with various emotions. Two of them exchange smiles and comment on how beautiful her pronunciation is. Meanwhile, Siroka observes that despite her strong and confident exterior, she is also remarkably dedicated to her studies. He comments that it's no surprise she's smart. He realizes that more importantly, she probably approaches her review procedures with the same seriousness as her archery practice. He notes that given her attention to pronunciation, grammar, and translations, she must have absorbed all the knowledge perfectly during her review. With a smile, he thinks that her pronunciation could be considered an art form in itself. He concludes that she likely doesn't need his help after all. As he is reflecting on this, the teacher suddenly praises Yumizuka with a smile, saying her reading was excellent and asking her to read a bit more. He requests everyone to listen attentively. The compliment makes the other students even more impressed. Yumizuka agrees calmly, but Siroka notices that she seems troubled as she continues reading. He realizes that her discomfort stems from having to read sections she hadn't planned for and which weren't part of her procedure. He feels grateful that they are seated in the last row, so no one besides him has noticed her distress. Suddenly, the teacher glances at his watch and remarks in surprise that time is running short. He apologizes to Yumizuka and asks her to skip ahead 3 pages to the climax of the story. Hearing this, Siroka is stunned, as Yumizuka looks completely shocked and on the verge of breaking down. He realizes she's reached her limit and decides he needs to step in. With this thought, he raises his hand and calls out to the teacher. The teacher asks about the problem and Siroka politely requests permission to continue reading instead of skipping ahead. The teacher looks puzzled and asks him if there's a specific reason for his request. At first, he struggles to come up with an answer, but eventually explains that there's nothing wrong. She was reading so smoothly that he thought it would be better if she continued normally. The teacher simply responds that there isn't enough time in class to cover everything. Siroka tries once more to convince the teacher, but his request is denied. The teacher insists that Yumizuka continue reading. Astonished, she appears to be on the verge of breaking down, and Siroka feels as though she is muttering some sort of mysterious incantation. He looks at her, trying to offer reassurance, but she remains extremely nervous and is clearly struggling to keep herself together. In a frightened tone, she says that, as the daughter of the Yumizuka clan, it's deeply embarrassing for someone else to witness such a vulnerable moment. Overwhelmed by this heavy realization, she suddenly bursts into loud, uncontrollable tears. He is taken aback by her reaction and wonders if she's really crying so openly. He thinks to himself that she shouldn't have to endure this. Feeling a surge of embarrassment, he finds tears welling up in his own eyes. He reflects on his own inadequacy, feeling that he has failed her by allowing her to reveal her weakness to everyone. In his mind, he apologizes to Yumizuka, lamenting that despite his promise to help, he hasn't been able to follow through. Suddenly, he hears another voice crying. As he looks up, he notices that the teacher is also crying. Confused, he wonders why the teacher is so emotional. The teacher, with a sad tone, tells Yumizuka that he knows she truly understands the depth of the story. He adds that he himself was deeply moved when he first read it. He also remarks that choosing this textbook was definitely the right decision. Meanwhile, the other students begin to chat among themselves, expressing their admiration for Yumizuka. They comment that her ability to read English and be moved to tears by the content shows not only her intelligence, but also her saintly compassion. Siroka, surprised by the compliments, reflects that although he doesn't fully understand the situation, it seems that everything has turned out well. The teacher then addresses the entire class, encouraging them to aspire to read English with the same depth of understanding as Yumizuka. Siroka is impressed by her remarkable recovery. After class, he approaches her as they walk outside and quickly apologizes, expressing regret for not being able to help her during the incident. She reassures him that there's no need to apologize, explaining that the issue was due to her own lack of practice, not his actions. With a warm and cheerful smile, she thanks him for keeping his promise to support her. He, puzzled by her reaction, decides that he will simply keep her secret. After a while in class, he approaches her and with a polite tone hands her a book, saying it contains today's diary. She thanks him with a sweet smile and assures him she will submit it once she finishes writing. He nods in agreement. As she walks away, another student, Nakayama, approaches Siroka from behind, holding him with a slightly annoyed expression. He asks him sternly when he became so close to Yumizuka. With a nervous tone, Siroka tries to reassure him that it's just part of his regular duties, nothing more. As he reflects on the past, he realizes that previously, when he handed her the diary, she responded casually. In contrast, her demeanor has significantly changed in their recent interactions. He realizes that the change in Yumizuka's behavior is due to the secrets he has learned about her and the increased closeness that has developed between them despite a few incidents. As he is thinking this over, the teacher enters the classroom and inquires who is responsible for day duty today. Siroka replies that it's him. The teacher then asks him to take the documents back to the data room. Siroka agrees and heads off to complete the task. The teacher then suggests that carrying the documents might be too much for one person, so he and Yumizuka can take them together. Siroka is surprised by this, but they both agree to the plan. Now, he and Yumizuka carry the documents together on their way to the data room. Siroka appears a bit embarrassed, while Yumizuka looks adorable. He nervously thinks that this might be his chance to talk to her normally, but the situation still makes him anxious, and he isn't quite sure what to say. She then turns to him with a polite smile and thanks him for carrying so many documents. He responds with a reassuring smile, saying it's no trouble at all. With a calm heart, he reflects on her that when she wears her usual archery uniform, she appears incredibly stoic, always holding her head high. However, in her school uniform, standing right beside him, he realizes just how small and slender she is. His thoughts unexpectedly shift to her chest, and he casually notes that not every part of her is small. As he's lost in thought, she suddenly calls out to him. He is startled and asks in a worried tone if something is wrong, fearing that she might have overheard his comment. However, she simply informs him that her club activities are about to start and politely asks if they could hurry. He agrees calmly, and they make their way to the data room. Upon entering, he comments on the spaciousness of the room, but is unsure where they should place the documents. She glances at a high spot on the shelf and cutely suggests that the documents should be placed up there. He looks at the spot and realizes it's too high for him to reach. He comments that he can't reach it at all, and she notes that his height seems insufficient. He mentions that there should be a ladder for this task. However, when he searches for it, he can't find it and wonders if someone might have borrowed it. With a serious tone, she comments that they can't afford to search for the ladder now, as she will be late for her club activities. She adds that, as the daughter of the Yumizuka family, she cannot allow that to happen. Hearing this, Siroka assures her that if that's the case, she should go ahead to the dojo and leave the task to him. He will handle it. However, she does not agree with his suggestion. She explains that she cannot abandon a task halfway through, as it is against the principles of someone who has devoted themselves to Budo. Confused, Siroka asks her what they should do next. With a cute smile, she suggests a good idea. Siroka then stands tall, and she climbs onto the shoulder to place the books on the top shelf. He feels embarrassed and wonders if this is really the right thing to do. He is also concerned that he might be the only one who feels this could be a bad idea. Though they might not have much time, being so close makes him uneasy. As he contemplates this, Yumizuka politely asks him to move slightly to the left. When she adjusts her position, her thigh brushes against Siroka's face. He is taken aback as he realizes she is clamping her legs to balance herself, causing her thighs to press against his face. When she shifts slightly forward, her chest presses against his head. He is even more astonished, noting that while she is petite, she certainly has a noticeable volume. Suddenly, he halts his thoughts, realizing that their close proximity has made him overlook something important. He notices that Yumizuka's eyes, fixated on the task at hand, reflect the intensity of someone aiming for their target. It dawns on him that she might approach everything with the same focus she uses in archery, becoming completely absorbed and unaware of her surroundings. He also worries that if anyone were to see them in this position, it could be problematic for her. He realizes he needs to address the situation. He calls out to her calmly and straightforwardly asks if she could loosen her legs a bit. She is taken aback by the request and feels a pang of guilt. Tears well up in her eyes as she places her hands on her knees, while still perched on Siroka's shoulder, apologizing politely. As she adjusts herself, Siroka is even more astonished, as her chest now presses directly against his face. In his shock, he shifts his body, causing her to lose her balance. She remarks that she can't stay steady. As they both topple, they fall to the floor, with Siroka sprawled out and Yumizuka sitting on his head, her legs stretched out. She anxiously asks if he's all right, but Siroka is stunned to find himself positioned directly between her legs. Noticing this, Yumizuka's face turns pale, and she urgently commands him to close his eyes. At that moment, Siroka is completely embarrassed, his face flushing with shame, and he can't manage to say a word. In this instance, he uncovers yet another secret about Yumizuka. Afterwards, they head outside for cleaning. The teacher instructs everyone to move to their designated areas and start tidying up. Siroka and Yumizuka find themselves together once more. They carry the bin between them, heading calmly to dispose of the trash. With a smile, Yumizuka apologizes for making him come along to take out the trash. He reassures her with a smile that it's no trouble at all. He happily reflects that he's getting used to being alone with her, and more than anything, he feels genuinely pleased. He also considers that her invitation for help might indicate she's starting to feel more comfortable around him. Then she casually mentions that if she doesn't stick close to him, who knows what might happen again. He thinks this makes sense, but realizes it also means her trust in him has grown to this level. He realizes that compared to when he used to silently watch her through the fence, their current situation is a significant improvement. Then they reach the garbage area, where several large bins are positioned. He notices two troublemakers sitting near the bins, engaged in conversation. He warns Yumizuka not to make eye contact with them. She reassures him with a smile, telling him not to worry. Just then, one of the guys tosses a cold drink can into the bin designated for burnable trash. Seeing this, she becomes angry and calls out to the two troublemakers in a stern tone. Holding the can, she firmly instructs them to sort their trash properly before disposing of it. Siroka, concerned, watches closely. One of the troublemakers approaches her with a menacing look. He uses foul language and with a dirty grin suggests they should play around a bit. As he reaches out to touch her, she quickly grabs his hand, evades his attempt, and rotates back calmly. The troublemaker is stunned, wincing in pain from his arm and unable to move. From a distance, Siroka politely asks if she is all right. The other delinquent steps forward, and upon recognizing her as Yumizuka Iroha, the well-known archer, Both of them are astonished. They quickly flee the scene. Siroka, observing her, feels a surge of admiration, thinking that she stood her ground firmly, even against delinquents, and comments to himself that she is truly amazing. He marvels at her, saying that she is impressive even outside of archery. As she tosses the garbage into the bin, she asks him to stop praising her so much, as it makes her feel embarrassed. Siroka watches her and suddenly notices a mistake. He quickly informs her that their class's trash was burnable, and she is putting it in the plastic section. When she realizes her error, she is visibly shocked and becomes flustered once again. She feels that by failing to sort the trash correctly, she has sullied the reputation of the Yumizuka clan. She kneels down and starts apologizing to Siroka, her distress evident. Surprised by her reaction, Siroka watches as she anxiously asks what she should do now, given that a daughter of the Yumizuka family has committed such a dishonorable act. In her panic, she suddenly begins rolling on the ground. He looks at her in confusion, but his attention is quickly drawn to the bad guys returning with a group of other boys. This time, however, they aren't looking for a fight. Instead, they approach Yumizuka to ask for her autograph, excitedly announcing that they are big fans. Siroka becomes increasingly worried, seeing that Yumizuka is still rolling on the ground in a state of panic and isn't aware of the approaching fans. He realizes that if the fans see her like this, it could jeopardize her ability to continue at the school. Suddenly, his gaze lands on the garbage bin and an idea forms in his mind. Acting quickly, he grabs the bin and covers Yumizuka with it while she is still panicking. When the fans arrive, they look around but don't spot Yumizuka. With disappointed expressions, they comment on how strange it is that she was here just a minute ago and eventually leave. After the incident, she becomes furious with him for covering her with the garbage bin. He apologizes profusely for his mistake, but she turns her face away in anger and refuses to speak to him. Despite her silence, he thinks that even though she won't hear his explanation, she still looks incredibly cute, even when she's upset. This cold treatment from her continues for 3 days, but he can't help but find her endearing. The next day, as they are all in the classroom, a stunning girl enters and with a sweet smile, asks Siroka if Yumizuka is there. Siroka, surprised by her appearance, turns to Yumizuka and informs her that someone is looking for her. Yumizuka glances at the girl, then comments in a nonchalant tone that it's nearly time for her club activities. She approaches the girl, and Siroka turns back to the others. Nakayama, with a strict tone, comments that he is quite lucky. Siroka looks confused and asks what he means. Nakayama explains that he's referring to the fact that he just spoke with Yagami Eri. He adds that she's known as the queen of the class and is a super popular, stunning beauty who might even rival Yumizuka in their first year. Curious, he asks Siroka if he seriously doesn't know who Yagami Eri is. With a puzzled expression, he reflects that he's never really paid attention to anyone other than Yumizuka. Meanwhile, Yagami, with a friendly smile, confirms Yumizuka's identity and mentions that Yagami has always wanted to talk to her. As the other students watch the interaction, they comment in amazement that it's a contest between the top 2 beauties of their first year. They also refer to it as the clash between East and West. Siroka is puzzled by this term and asks for clarification. Nakayama is surprised that Siroka doesn't know and explains that Yagami is a Japanese returnee from Hawaii, and her name suggests she has mixed heritage. He adds that the most impressive part is that Yagami comes from a wealthy family capable of affording luxuries like a yacht, much like a celebrity. Siroka is taken aback by this revelation. As he looks around, he notices that students from other classes are also gathering here. Nakayama points this out and explains that these students are Yagami's retainers. He adds that wherever Yagami goes, her retainers are sure to follow, and she often uses them to make appearances and greet popular students from other classes. With a frustrated tone, Nakayama adds that the opposing side will likely submit to Yagami's influence and become her retainers as well. Siroka then asks him how he knows so much about this. He also wonders if this means Yagami is trying to recruit Yumizuka into her faction. Realizing that he can't let that happen, he feels a sense of urgency to take action. Meanwhile, Yumizuka tells Yagami that she would like to talk to her, but she has to leave for her club activities now. With a smile, she requests to arrange another time for their conversation. The other students, witnessing this, are stunned and comment that Yumizuka just rejected the queen's invitation. They remark that, as expected of the Bao princess of Amaku, archery takes precedence. With a smile, Yagami tells Yumizuka that she's heard she's quite skilled with a bow and mentions that she also has some experience in archery herself. Despite this, Yumizuka remains calm. Nakayama, watching this exchange, is impressed. He notes that by hinting that she too has a high level of archery skill, Yagami is subtly positioning herself as superior to Yumizuka. Siroka grasps the situation as well. Yagami then remarks with a charming smile that she has watched many thrilling matches during the recent Olympics. One of the other guys, excited, mentions that he watched the Olympics too. Nakayama, dismissively, calls him a fool and questions whether he thinks he is on the same level as Yagami. He comments that she must have watched the Olympics live and in person, noting her wealth. Yagami adds that the heat in August was simply unbearable. Siroka, however, is taken aback. He realizes something feels off because the last Olympics were held in the southern hemisphere, where August would have been winter. He doesn't want to suspect her, but he realizes that someone who is called a queen might not have attended the event as claimed. He considers pointing out the discrepancy but worries about embarrassing her in front of her retainers. Instead, he decides to handle the situation more discreetly. Concerned for her dignity, Siroka types a message on his phone and shows it to Yagami. At first, Yagami is confused, but as she reads the message, she becomes embarrassed upon realizing that Siroka has caught her in a lie. She announces to everyone that it's time for her afternoon tea and bids Yumizuka farewell with a sweet smile before leaving. Her retainers follow her closely behind. Observing this, Nakayama remarks that Yagami even has afternoon tea like a celebrity. As she departs, Siroka watches with confusion, wondering what to make of the situation. Meanwhile, Yumizuka informs him in a calm tone that it's time for her to head to her club. As she walks away, Siroka steps outside, thinking he needs to head to the archery field as well. Suddenly, he hears someone calling his name. Turning around, he is surprised to see Yagami standing there. He wonders why she is calling him over. As he approaches her, Yagami, with a flushed face, tells him she has something to say. He feels a bit awkward about the situation. She then demands to know his intentions with a stern tone. Siroka, still confused, asks what she means. She sharply orders him not to play dumb, insisting that she knows he saw through her entire facade and must have something else on his mind.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial about my love. Here I stand,